I've always loved English, always loved writing, and early on, I was a teacher and a cross-country coach, and so I was able to do both of those. And I never would have guessed that I'd be doing this, 30 years later.
By this, Willie Steele could mean several things. One, being a college professor. Or two, working on a book about Major League Baseball after 9/11. Or maybe he could mean learning to throw a knuckleball in his 50s, with a little help from a Cy Young Award winner. Take your pick, but Willie's found a way to make it all work. And you could say it all started in a Nashville movie theater back in 1989. More on that in a little bit. I'm Demetria Kaladimos. It's Banner & Company. Well, thanks for doing this, Willie.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We were put together as buddies.
Yes.
In my one-year stint at Lipscomb, and I got to thank you even today for making that time for me easier.
Well, I hope I did anyway. I remember when they told me, when the provost told me, said, "Hey, you're going to be the faculty mentor for Demetria." I was like, "What?" It was, and I think it was about 10 minutes before it actually happened. So, but no, it was a lot of fun.
No, thank you again. When you were like in the 6th grade, would you have guessed that you'd become a college professor?
No, I was supposed to play outfield for the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Of course.
And then by the time I got to 7th grade, I realized that wasn't going to happen. But no, I never in a million years would have guessed that I would be doing this.
Where are you from? You came here for college, right?
I did. I grew up in a little town in between Columbus and Cincinnati, Ohio, middle of nowhere, lots of hog farms and soybean fields. And came down here in 91 to go to Lipscomb. And I went home after that first year to work over the summer, and that next year I stayed down in Nashville. Ohio is a good place to be from. Wonderful people, great place to grow up, but I fell in love with Nashville, the people, the culture, and just have always considered this since that time to be home.
Was Lipscomb a family tradition?
Yeah, so, my dad worked for a small church in Ohio, and we would come down. They used to have an event every summer where people from all over the country would come in, and we came down, and we would spend an extra couple of days and turn it into a family vacation. And I just really kind of felt like, boy, Nashville's just a great place. It was, as we were talking earlier, it was a different city back then. In the 80s and early 90s, but I fell in love with it and decided to make it home. But yeah, it kind of became a tradition with a lot of folks in our community coming down and meeting some folks from around the country and doing events on campus and things like that. So,
was your dad a preacher?
He was for 21 years, and then eventually he was working in a small town. You're sort of a jack of all trades. He did a lot of other jobs. Was an EMT. Worked with a mentally handicapped school for several years, and so yeah, Dad was like the most gifted guy that I've ever known. Like being able to, you plug him into anything, and he would make it work. I wish I were more like that.
Let's go back to 1989, though. You went to the movies,
Did.
and it sort of set the course for your academic and professional life in a way.
Yeah, you've done some research.
A little bit.
Yeah. It was funny. We were down here. We were in Nashville. And my brothers, I've got 2 brothers and a sister, but my brothers and I and some friends loaded up and went out to the old Fountain Square movie theater. And now I'm starting to date myself a little bit.
Right.
Went out to the old Fountain Square movie theater, and everybody in the group except me wanted to go see the latest Indiana Jones installment. I think it was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. But I had seen this trailer about a guy who plows under his cornfield and builds a baseball field. I mean, I'm all in. And so I went and watched it by myself and fell in love with that movie. And that I didn't know it at the time. I've told this story before. In the novel Shoeless Joe that was turned into the film Field of Dreams, the Doc Graham character, played by Burt Lancaster, in the film says hardly anybody recognizes the most significant moments of their lives while they're happening. It's only years later. And that has never been more true than in this case. I did not know that that would sort of be the first domino that fell that would lead me to what I'm doing now, because 8 or 9 years later, I'm at Middle Tennessee State. I've got to do a master's thesis. Well, let's see if they'll let me write about baseball. So I did father and son relationships in the novel. I thought, okay, we pulled that off, Fast forward a few more years, I'm in Indiana, Pennsylvania, working on my PhD. Got to do a dissertation. So I decided to do all of W.P. Kinsella's baseball novels. And then my dissertation committee said, you should get this published. And I was kind of done with it at that point. I'm like, no. Well, a few years later, I kind of blow the dust off of it and submit it to a publisher. And that got turned into my first book, A Member of the Local Nine. And W.P. Kinsella read it. And I get this email in the fall of, I guess, 2012. And it was W.P. Kinsella, the author. And he says, you didn't screw this up too much, which is,
That's a heck of a compliment.
I asked him later, I said, could I use that as a blurb on the book? He goes, yeah. He
on
said,
the cover.
Yeah, he says, you don't make a fool of yourself as so many academics tend to do. And I thought, that's a win.
Sure.
That's like Tony Gwynn saying, you got a pretty good swing, Ted Williams. And so a couple of weeks later, he reached out and he said, I've got an idea, feel free to, tell me to take a flying leap, but would you want to write my biography? I had never written a biography. No, I take that back. I wrote my grandmother's biography in 7th grade, but looking back on it, it should be labeled as fiction because I might have taken some liberties. I said my grandmother was a full-blooded Cherokee, which she's not, but I just was really into Cherokee, So I thought if I do this, I can't make up stuff this time. So I spent about 6 years researching and writing, getting to know Kinsella, getting to know his family, and then the book came out in 2018. And it's I've been fortunate to be part of documentaries. I was at the first Field of Dreams game with Kinsella's oldest daughter, and all of this happened because I went to the movies by myself in 1989.
I don't want to get too into Kinsella, but
Yeah.
it's interesting that he's Canadian. How did he get so into baseball? Not that baseball isn't in Canada. But it's America's
It's a great
game.
question. His dad was American and was working in different mining camps and doing construction and things while he was a young man. Settled down outside of Edmonton. Married a Canadian, and so Kinsella at any point could have had dual citizenship, but opted not to, primarily because of the healthcare issue. He thought he would just stay in Canada, but he fell in love with baseball and the radio and following it in the newspaper, box scores, and
Who was his team?
the Seattle Mariners. Yeah, and they
Makes
lived,
sense,
not far from the border, up in Blaine, Washington for a while, White Rock, Edmonton, or Vancouver, and so he fell in love with the Mariners, and so he would really be thrilled that Ichiro got in. He actually did a project with some Japanese writers who were interviewing him about Ichiro and the Mariners, so I think he'd be pretty thrilled.
Yeah. The James Earl Jones character in Field of Dreams is certainly J.D. Salinger, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In the novel, it's J.D. Salinger. After the book came out, Salinger's lawyers sent a letter, a very strongly worded letter, saying Mr. Salinger is not happy with being in this novel, and we're considering taking action, suing for libel. And Kinsella essentially said, have at it. Because it was like it would be the 7th or 8th definition of libel, which is, portraying someone in a false light. And in the novel, Salinger is this kindly older gentleman who's reclusive but is doing nobody any harm. And he says, if you want to tell people you're not a nice old man, do it. But when the studio got a hold of it, they didn't want to have any threat against them of a lawsuit, and so they changed it. Phil Robinson, when he wrote the script, actually had James Earl Jones in mind. James Earl Jones had done Fences on Broadway, and he had done Bingo Long, Traveling All-Stars, and Motor King. So he had baseball pedigree in his film canon already, and so it just for him it was like that's the voice you want, and you can't think of that movie without thinking of James Earl Jones, booming voice.
Yeah.
It is that film really.
And I can't think of you in 1989 by yourself. You were allowed to cry. You could cry in that movie, did you?
That's a great question. You know, I want to say absolutely not. I'm too strong for that. But I was
Come on,
16.
that ending scene, can we have a
Well,
catch?
I tell you, I don't remember crying, but I do remember. So Kinsella died in September of 2016, and my dad died unexpectedly 7 weeks later.
Oh, wow.
And it was the longest time before I watched that movie. And I've even even before Dad died, I would kind of get emoted, like, boy, it's a beautiful scene. Oh, that first time after Dad died in November of 16, it was it was awful. I couldn't fit it. But now I love it now, and Dad loved the movie too.
It's Banner and Company. I'm Demetria Kaladimos. We'll be right back. So this dissertation idea was a winner on all counts.
Seemed to be, yeah.
Do you tell your students, like, write something that you yourself want to read?
Yes, absolutely. I tell them, you never know when the most off-the-wall idea. I kind of approach this, Demetria, with, like, I'm going to write, I want to write about baseball, but is that academic enough? And looking back on it now, it is, like, it's my job to show why baseball matters. Baseball culture, baseball religion, baseball and gender, And I think that's my job, is to be able to make that come alive. And so I tell students, if a student comes in and says, well, this probably isn't a good paper, I'm like, no, stop. The students that you worked with the year on campus, where you did that great documentary about the scoreboard, the guitar-shaped scoreboard. One of the students on there, you may remember at Cooperstown, at the Cooperstown Symposium, said, before this project, I was not a baseball fan. I went to my first baseball game with Demetria, with my classmates, at the First Tennessee Park. And that blew me away. And now this guy realized, like, this is fun, but it's also ingrained in our culture. And so baseball does matter.
We should fill in the gaps there. You came to me and said, have you ever been to Cooperstown? Because we both like baseball. And I said, no, but I'd love to. And you mentioned that you went there frequently to present your papers and so forth, and said, come up with a proposal.
Yeah.
So we did. We came up with a documentary film proposal for a short. And actually, I remember running it past you, like, what do you think about something that we could do here locally, wouldn't require travel? And we came up with the guitar-shaped scoreboard and why it was so unique. And the story behind it really turned out to be fascinating.
Yeah, and the students, hearing them talk about, like, they were getting excited. Just the topic, being able to work with you and the experience they were getting from that. But also this, like, there's this thing now that they can point to and say, I was part of that. I helped film that. I helped interview R.A. Dickey. I did all of these different things. And I think for students, I used to, unfortunately, in my career, I would have them write a paper for one person, and that was me. And now I tell them, cast a bigger vision, right? Do something that you want other people to read, or I give them creative options. If there's a film student in my class, I'll still have you do some sort of written assessment, but if you want to make a film based on this book and do something creative, do a 7 or 8 minute short, man, have at it. Because that's what you want to do. And so if we can bring these fields together, my world of literature, if somebody's more into film, well, why can't you do a film short and have it play into what you want to do in your wheelhouse? And I think that's made my teaching a lot better, I hope. Mm-hmm. I guess you'd have to ask my students.
Yeah. The greatest teacher is exemplary work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And being exposed to it. I want to get to your new book and your new pursuit. Your new book, great topic. Yeah. Difficult topic, though. How did you come up with this idea? Tell us what it is.
So the book I'm working on now is about baseball in the aftermath of 9/11. And my brother and I were going to the Cooperstown Symposium one year, and we had flown in and out of LaGuardia, and we were crossing, is at the George Washington Bridge, I think, and we were looking down the river, and we kind of, I wonder what it was like on 9/11, right? To see this unfolding. And then we had our hotel. We were staying near Citi Field, where the Mets play. And then we got to talking about, I wonder what the teams were doing. And so we started talking. I thought, well, I wonder if anybody's written about this, and nobody had. There are some, some essays. Sports Illustrated did one, ESPN the magazine on 10th anniversary, 15th anniversary. And originally I thought I'm going to do all of Major League Baseball, and that's nobody wants to read a book that long. Researching it would take me 50 years. And so I decided to focus on the 4 teams closest to where the planes went down. So I'm telling the story from the Mets and Yankees, obviously the proximity to World Trade Center, the Pittsburgh Pirates. We're about 80 miles away from Shanksville, where Flight 93 went down. And then the Nationals weren't in D.C. yet, so the closest team to the Pentagon was the Baltimore Orioles. And so I've got all of these side stories. The Pirates had a brand new stadium and a brand new manager, a young up-and-coming team, and how did that affect them? Al Leiter was supposed to pitch for the Mets in Pittsburgh that night, but he had stayed in New York to take his daughter to her first day of school, September 10th. And so he's on an airplane waiting to push back from the gate when the first plane hits. Wow. And so getting these types of stories, Cal Ripken Jr. was going to retire at the end of the season. And so what had been this celebratory push towards his retirement was now overshadowed, rightfully so, by what happened on 9/11. And so I'm interviewing players, coaches, general managers, people. I had an interview with a guy who was a vendor at Yankee Stadium, had worked at Yankee Stadium for almost 50 years, and sold a program to a Secret Service sniper, Game 3 of the World Series, when he was going up to protect President Bush, who was throwing out the first pitch. And he said, this is sort of weird intersection. You've got this celebration of the World Series, but also the reality of what this guy's job is. And pulling those stories together, I think, is an important part of not just baseball history, but of American history. And so that's been consuming most of my time for the past few years, is working on that project, which I hope, if all goes well, will be out by next year.
Yeah. Did Major League Baseball decide when play would start again? I don't recall.
Yeah, so it happened that morning, and of course it didn't take very long for Bud Selig, who was the commissioner, to say, okay, games tonight are suspended. And then there was kind of this, when do we start them up? And so the plan originally was to start playing that weekend. And so I interviewed Jack Wilson, who was a rookie shortstop for the Pirates, and they were on, air traffic was still suspended. They were on a bus on their way to Chicago to go play your Cubs. And they got the phone call. Kevin Young, whom I also talked with, was the Pirates player representative, and his cell phone goes off, and they said, games aren't being played till Monday. And so the buses turned around at a truck stop and about halfway to Chicago and went back to Pittsburgh. And so the first games back were on September 17th, that Monday. So it was a week. Which surprised me.
Yeah.
It felt like it was longer, like looking back. And so the game was supposed to be played at Shea Stadium with the Pirates and Mets, but Shea Stadium was being used as a kind of a holding area for supplies and relief efforts and things. And so they flipped the game. So the Mets came back to Pittsburgh. The Yankees, a couple days later, opened up, resumed their season in Chicago with the White Sox. So it's interesting going back, and some things I remember very clearly, and then other things, I'd forgotten that happened. And then other things I'm learning for the first time. And it's interesting getting, all of us who are old enough to remember 9/11, remember exactly where we were.
Sure.
I was teaching and coaching in Portland, Oregon, and the first rumors coming through, a small Cessna hit the World Trade Center, And so it's interesting hearing all of these players, who are telling me the same types of things. Well, the first rumor was this, and I heard it from here, and this. And so being able to pull those stories together, I think, is going to be kind of an interesting time capsule for baseball history, but as I said, also just American history.
Yeah, not many people, of course, were around for Pearl Harbor, but they had the same sort of...
Exactly.
Well, that was December, but still.
Yeah, but I remember talking with my grandmother about Pearl Harbor while she was living, and she said, we got home from church, and, there was an announcement on the radio. And so those types, every generation has those moments. My dad could tell me where he was November 22nd, 1963, at Hannon High School in West Virginia, and the principal came in tears and made the announcement about President Kennedy. And so this is one of those moments. And so being able to look at, I mean, baseball is the national pastime. And so how did it respond to those horrific events of that morning, I think is an important story to tell.
Yeah. What's the most surprising nugget you've gotten so far from your research?
Oh, that's a great question. I think just how, when I think of Major League Baseball players, I think kind of like, well, they've got it made.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's
always fun.
Staying in 5-star hotels and get, they eat whatever they want and sleep in late. And they aren't any different. I mean, this sounds like a really kind of a boring nugget, but for me, the most fascinating thing is they are just like we are, Demetria. And they were as scared as we were. They were as concerned with their family. Roger Clemens hopped in his Hummer and drove from New York City nonstop, drove back to Texas to be with his family. Yeah. And, Jack Wilson for the Pirates found out about the first plane hitting. He and his wife had just found out that she was expecting their first child. And they were going into the doctor's office, riding this high of we're going to have a baby. And then they walk in and see what's on the screen. Wow. And just that reality, it's just a reminder that, we see these guys on TV and on the baseball cards and things like that, but they're not really any different than we are when it comes to these types of things. And that's, I think, one of those things that brought everybody together.
It's Banner and Company, and my guest is writer and Lipscomb professor Willie Steele. We'll be right back. We talked earlier about our little Lipscomb documentary project, which connected my students with the great R.A. Dickey.
Yeah.
I mean, I was more of a fangirl meeting this Major League Cy Young winning idol than the students were, but he was very gracious, and of course, he famously became a knuckleball pitcher, and his entire game changed.
Yeah.
So you have been bitten by the knuckleball bug, and how? Why?
So, where to start? Okay, so I'm doing all this 9/11 research, and it gets really heavy. And so I've got 2 daughters, and for years we would go, I coached their softball team when we lived in Oklahoma, and my youngest daughter and I she's kind of both my daughters have gone with me to games, but the first Field of Dreams game in Iowa, my youngest daughter went with me, and we were sitting with Kinsella's, and it was great, and we're playing catch out on the field, and it's wonderful. And so I would say, hey, Mary Ann, come out and catch my knuckleball. And so we would throw, and it was pretty awful. And so I got the idea, I want to learn how to throw a knuckleball. You remember the writer George Plimpton? Sure. Yeah, so Plimpton, used to write for Sports Illustrated, and he pitched against, the plan was to pitch against both the American League and the National League, kind of an all-star exhibition that they had at the end of I think it was the 1960 season, 61 maybe. And he didn't finish the first inning. It was embarrassing, but he wrote a whole book about it. He ended up writing Paper Lion, where he played for the Detroit Lions in preseason. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to learn how to throw a knuckleball, and I'm going to get into a game. So I mentioned this to Brian Ryman, the director of baseball operations at Lipscomb, and he starts laughing. We're in his office. He goes, let's call R.A. I'm like, well, not right now. Let me think this through.
Practice a little. Yeah.
And so, but a few days later, I get this email from R.A. Dickey and says, so explain what you're wanting to do. And I tried to explain, I want to throw a knuckleball. How hard could it be? Turns out, pretty darn hard. But R.A. came over to campus. And the next thing I know, I'm throwing 45-minute, hour bullpen session with R.A. Dickey. And he and Mary Ann, my youngest daughter, gave me similar advice. Every now and then I would get one that did what it was supposed to do. And both R.A. and Mary Ann would say, just keep doing that. I'm like, well...
whatever it is you did, do it again.
If I could do that, I wouldn't be teaching. I'd be getting ready for spring training.
Yeah.
And so last week I flew out to California and did a clinic with a group called Knuckleball Nation. A guy named Chris Nolan put it together, and he's kind of the knuckleball expert. And Charlie Huff, who pitched 25 years in the major leagues, was there. And so I got to interview him and got a 10-minute bullpen session with him. And I followed a 12-year-old kid who's learning to throw the knuckleball. And then here comes this 50-something college professor who comes in, and, Charlie sort of looked and he goes, "Now, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm learning how to throw a knuckleball." And so,
Who did better, you or the kid?
let's just focus on the fact that we were both there.
Okay.
But the kid's been throwing for 3 years. His dad started teaching him a knuckleball when he was 9 years old.
Wow.
And Charlie Huff watched him throw and said, "I don't have anything to tell you except get bigger, grow up.
Amazing.
You got great form, you got great delivery." And then I had to follow that up, Demetria. And I did not get those compliments. Like everything that Charlie didn't have to tell this kid, I got tenfold. Put your hand here, do this, So I'm not giving up the teaching job yet, but the plan is to still find a team that will let me pitch an inning.
You don't care where?
No, I've reached out to the guys at the Baseball Hall of Fame. They did a classic, the East-West Classic, and here's the way I look at it. Somebody said, "Aren't you worried about embarrassing yourself?" I said, "No. Here's why. If I come back next fall, I go to the first faculty meeting, right, like the one you were at. They say, 'How was your summer?' And if I say, 'Well, I gave up a 600-foot home run to King Griffey Jr.,' that's a pretty good story, right?
Yeah.
If I come back and they say, 'How was your summer?' and I said, 'King Griffey Jr. screwed himself into the ground trying to hit my knuckleball, and I struck him out on 3 pitches.' Now I got a better story." And so really it's a win-win. And so, we'll see what happens. But it's sort of like the quest for the perfect knuckleball, which I'm realizing isn't a thing. You throw it and hope for the best is really what happens.
Yeah. For those uninitiated or uninterested in baseball, and I can't even imagine someone that's not interested in baseball.
I feel bad for them.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Explain what the knuckleball does and why it's so just elusive.
Yeah, so with a knuckleball, you're really throwing it with your fingernails, right? And the way I hold it, the way I make it sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
The way R.A. showed me to do it, and Charlie, your first 2 fingers, your middle finger and your pointer finger are dug in there, and you're kind of holding it with the thumb and the ring finger as kind of guardrails. And when you release it, a regular pitch will spin back, right? And that's how it gets movement. With a knuckleball, it's actually tumbling forward, and as it tumbles, the air will catch the seams, and it sort of directs it wherever it's going to go. And with guys like R.A., who were throwing, he'd been throwing 90-plus miles an hour, and now was taking speed off of it. He was still throwing in the 70s and low 80s, but with less movement, and so the ball would kind of dance around. It's Bobby Mercer, who played for the Yankees, said he said throwing a knuckleball, trying to hit a knuckleball, is like trying to eat Jell-O with chopsticks. And I'm realizing that that's pretty accurate. Bob Uecker, who just passed away, Bob Uecker said he was a catcher and said the best way to catch a knuckleball is to let it stop rolling and then just pick it up. And I'm realizing that there's a lot of truth to both of those things.
What's your training regimen?
Well, this teaching thing keeps getting in the way.
Dang.
Right? I know. I need to talk to my dean about that.
I will.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll have a word.
I appreciate that. And just in case, are you hiring? Because I may need, once she hears that.
A fallback?
Yeah, I think, I still throw in the yard. I've got a friend of mine who has said, he'll come to campus and throw with me whenever. And so I've got my classes structured where I'm only teaching on Tuesdays and Thursdays of the semester. And so the plan is to get in the bullpen as much as I can on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then keep throwing with the girls on Saturday, Sunday, and see what happens.
So your daughters catch for you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, my
Nice.
Youngest especially, because my oldest lives on campus now, right? And so, and I think they both think it's kind of a funny topic, but I think, when I bring it up, they kind of roll their eyes a little bit. It's like, Dad and his knuckleball again. Like, this could be the next book, though.
Can you feel it coming off correctly out of your hand?
Like both times that it has? Yes. When it does, it's like, oh, okay, I can do that. And then I get inside my own head.
Right.
And that's what I'm hearing from a lot of these guys. I asked R.A., I said, can you tell when it's going to be a good day? And he said, there are some days in the bullpen where you think, boy, if I can just get through the lineup one time, He said, and he essentially said, there are sometimes you think it's going to go well and it doesn't. and sometimes you think it's not going to go well. He goes, but there are times where when it's going well, you know it's going to be a good day. I haven't had that day yet.
Have you faced any of the Lipscomb hitters? I mean,
Not
they
yet.
always have a decent team.
They
Good
do.
team.
They do. And I've got several of the players in my class, and I think they would absolutely love the chance to tee off on their professor. I haven't been brave enough to ask them yet, but I'm not opposed to it. So, Coach Forehand, if you're listening, I'll, name the time and place.
So when can we expect this actual game debut? I mean, if all goes to plan.
So, I'm like I said, I'm still waiting to hear back from the guys at the Hall of Fame, and the guy who heads it up used to be a PR guy for the Red Sox, and he in an email said, "I love this idea. I think it's fantastic. The Plimpton idea is great. I don't know that we're going to do that game, and if we do, I don't know that everybody else will be as receptive." Mm-hmm. Personally, I think it's a fantastic idea.
Me too.
But I had a Wood Bat League team in North Carolina direct message me on Twitter and said, "Hey, if you're serious about because I'll post things about throwing a knuckleball," and they said, "If you're serious and develop a knuckleball, we can't put you in an actual game, but we'll put you in an exhibition." I don't know if it's a downside. It's against college kids who are playing in Wood Bat Leagues in the summer with the hopes of getting drafted. And so it would be like me throwing against my kids. So we'll see. Stay tuned. I'll keep you posted.
Absolutely.
That could be your next documentary, Dimitri.
Hey, decent idea.
Okay.
We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. Let's go out with an audio postcard from the bullpen at Dugan Field. That's on the Lipscomb campus. Maybe not the field of dreams. There's no corn in sight. But it is a place where father and daughter can play a little catch.
And then you got it. Coach over here, you got that. You're good, coach. Well, I'm not very good at catching anything. So different for sure. I don't know, I kind of just I'm more like watching him throw it, honestly, cuz I haven't witnessed it in person at all. This is my first time seeing his knuckleball. So I'm kind of mesmerized by that before I catch it. I think it's so cool. Lifelong dream fulfilled. I think he's wanted, I don't know, he's always been a big baseball guy. I think it's pretty cool that he gets to take time off of work and do it. Yeah, for a long time, I don't know, since it was safe, I guess. Kindergarten, yeah, since I was able to. I don't know. We just would go out in the backyard, play catch. He'd always get me a new glove when I outgrew it. Yeah.
I've tried to teach her knuckleball a couple of. See, that one did what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. I mean, if he wants to teach me, I guess I got that. Maybe. Honestly, I don't know. That can be his thing.
Banner and Company is a production of the New Nashville Banner. Our producers are Steve Harouche and Andrea Tudhope. Original music is by Verlin Thompson. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or go to NashvilleBanner.com. You're in good company. We do a little thing here on the podcast. The final question is from a previous guest, and it's in the fishbowl.
Oh gosh.
So select carefully.
I'm scared.
No need to fear.
Okay, well, you're not the one that has to answer the question.
Exactly.
All right, so somewhere I've got glasses. All right. From Giancarlo Guerrero. Have you ever
been an armchair conductor? Meaning, have you ever caught yourself conducting, either listening to a piece or maybe driving on I-65 going 70 miles an hour?
Yeah, I just listened to this podcast last night, actually. This is the guy with the symphony?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, and not only a conductor, I am one of the greatest air drummers.
Ah.
You throw in Rush, right? Neil Peart. I mean, I'll go beat for beat with Neil Peart in the comfort of my own car. So yeah, I think everybody. Who do you know anybody who's not an armchair conductor, Demetria?
No.
Yeah. So, but yes. So the answer is yes, absolutely.